Welcome to the Rules Plus podcast. If you didn't join me last week for the initial episode, I'm confident you're going to find this second episode interesting anyway. Just so you know, the purpose of this podcast is to expand access to group study of NCAA football rules for members of the Austin Football Officials Association who participate in a voluntary study group that we call Rules Plus before our weekly business meetings during the fall. AFOA members officiate high school football throughout Central Texas under the supervision of our parent membership organization, the Texas Association of Sports Officials, referred to as TASO. The topic I covered last week was the NCAA football rules changes for the coming 2023 season. In this episode, I'm going to follow up with some clarifications that were covered this past Saturday by our TASO clinician, Assistant Executive Director Bill Theodore of TASO. I first met Bill in the locker room at the Dallas Cowboys AT&T Stadium in 2017 as my crew was preparing to work a state championship game. So let's get to business. You'll recall that last week I discussed what I referred to as 5 NCAA rules changes of interest to us in Texas, where high schools play by NCAA rules. Those changes were concerning the extension of periods. Now that's done only for the second and fourth periods. Concerning the game clock stopping after first downs. In college ball, that will no longer happen. Consecutive timeouts, not to be allowed by the same team in a single dead ball interval. Instant replay may be used in games without a replay official. And the final change was referred to by me as second-level defenders on place kick plays, having now a 1-second restriction on making contact. After extensive discussion of the 3 changes concerning timing, and ignoring the instant replay provision that's irrelevant in high school games, I closed an already lengthy podcast with a relatively superficial discussion of the new restriction on defenders during place kick plays, treating that rules change almost as an afterthought. Well, that was a little sloppy. So here's the rest of the story, as Bill Theodore shared with us for perhaps 15 minutes in a very warm, very muggy high school cafeteria space. The rest of the story is this. I could have, probably should have, been more precise about the origin of the rule change concerning place kicks. That new restriction on rushers during place kicks is not an NCAA rules change. In a precedent-bending move, the change was mandated by Texas's University Interscholastic League, the state's governing body for athletic, musical, and academic contests for public primary and secondary schools. Created in 1910 by the University of Texas at Austin, the UIL today is the largest organization of its kind in the world. So when the UIL speaks, many athletics influencers in Texas and elsewhere tend to listen. Every year, the UIL publishes exceptions, totaling 56 in 2023, to NCAA football rules for high school play, such as periods of 12 minutes instead of 15 minutes and kickoffs from the 40-yard line instead of the 35-yard line. The new restriction on rushers, so-called exception number 52 in the 2023 UIL list of exceptions, was added by the UIL after heavy lobbying by high school coaches. So while you'll see this restriction enforced in Texas high school games this season, you will not see it in college games. Item 52 is not merely an exception, it is, in fact, a new rule entirely, created by the UIL. For this reason, TASO clinician Theodore suggested that this UIL-generated rule change is doubly notable because of, one, its off-field impact on the UIL's role in shaping rules of play, and two, its on-field impact for coaching and officiating place kick plays. The off-field impact could be substantial, whereas previously the UIL's role has been to simply reject or modify existing NCAA rules as appropriate for high school. Proactively introducing a high school specific playing rule cracks open the door to further, perhaps extensive initiation of playing rules based on neither NCAA nor NFHS protocols. The on field impact could be substantial as well for defenders in a 2-point stance, particularly defenders on the edge of the offensive formation, ready to sprint around that edge to block the kick. Now that they must wait 1 second before initiating contact on those edge blockers. For Texas high school officials, the challenge becomes twofold. What mechanics should we adopt to assign responsibility for watching for this foul, particularly in 5-person crews? And what should our philosophy be about judging whether contact is a foul or is incidental? Imagine the impact on a game's outcome when a field goal attempt is blocked and returned for a touchdown by an edge rusher who immediately brushes a blocker on his way to blocking the kick. You make the call. For now, that's the last word about this story. As the 2023 high school season unfolds, it will be interesting to see if we'll be returning to this unicorn of a rule change. Also last week, I spent relatively little time on the rule change limiting teams to one charged timeout in any single dead ball period. Bill Theodore's presentation touched on scenarios that merit a little more discussion now. Here is the relevant sentence added to Rule 3-3-4-A. Quote, consecutive charged team timeouts are not allowed by the same team in any individual dead ball period. End quote. That adjective consecutive created an opening for a classic rules plus nitpick what if scenario among the officials sitting around me at the Rules Clinic. What if, one wise guy asked, Team B calls a timeout to freeze a kicker, but then Team A calls a timeout to set up a play to go for it instead? Can Team B call another timeout when it sees what formation Team A sets up in? Well, that's actually a very good question. With an intervening timeout by Team A second Team B timeout would not seem to be consecutive. But Theodore left no room for ambiguity. Team B's timeout should not be recognized. The key provision is in the next sentence, which clarifies that, quote, each team is entitled to 3 charged team timeouts during each half, with no more than 1 charged team timeout available per team per individual dead ball period, end quote. That means that intervening timeouts, injuries, dead ball fouls, measurements, or substitutions are irrelevant. There's only 1 timeout for each team during any dead ball period. When coaches get used to this rule change, they're going to realize the potential risk in taking a timeout solely to ice a kicker. This change also introduces risk for the offensive team in taking a timeout. The first team to take a timeout at the start of a dead ball period may find that it cannot respond as it would like to when a change in circumstances occurs due to injury, penalty enforcement, or the other team's strategy change. As an editor and writer by profession, it's obvious to me that the revision of Rule 3-3-4-A could have been cleaner. The added sentence about consecutive timeouts is superfluous. The following sentence specifying 1 timeout per dead ball period is clear as can be. I think the Rules Committee was so focused on addressing back-to-back timeouts by the defense in a particular place kick scenario that the adjective consecutive was trapped in their heads and so appeared on the page. I also wonder whether laser focus on the freezing the kicker scenario might have left the Rules Committee unmindful of the implications of the rule change in other plausible scenarios. It would not surprise me if in 2024 either there is an editorial change in the rule or there is a reconsideration of keeping the rule if games in 2023 are negatively affected by its unanticipated implications. Before I end this episode, let me share one instructive play scenario from several videos that Theodore shared. In a playoff game from last year, the officiating crew was confronted near the end of the first period with a scenario that created a somewhat perfect storm of complicating features. Here's the play. Team A snaps the ball with 2nd and goal at the 6-yard line as the clock shows around 10 seconds to go. Team B commits a clear pass interference foul at the 1-yard line, and the pass falls incomplete. Meanwhile, the clock continues to running out, in fact, though it should have been stopped with 3 or 4 seconds to go in the period. So the crew faces several things to sort out. Where should the ball be placed? With what down and distance? And should the period be extended? Well, what the crew did was place the ball on the 1-yard line for a 1st and goal for Team A, and they then moved to the other end of the field to start the second period. No one in the crew apparently was aware that time perhaps should have been added back to the clock. Theodore explained that the immediate point of showing the play is that the crew's decision to enforce the penalty, set the ball up, and then move to the other end of the field was incorrect then, but would be correct now under the rule change concerning extending a period. But of course, the larger lesson was about crew communication and taking time to get things right. The penalty should have taken the ball to the 2-yard line because the penalty was enforced from the 6-yard line. The statement of the penalty in Rule 7-3-8 provides that, quote, no penalty enforced from outside the 2-yard line may place the ball inside the 2-yard line, end quote. And the crew should also have been aware of the status of the clock at the time the ball became dead. As Theodore pointed out, the crew in the video was experienced and excellent. We have all been there. We must remain alert until the very end. It's a lesson that is always relevant. Well, that's it for now. If you're an AFOA member, we're a week closer to the resumption of our live Rules Plus discussions in August, and I hope this podcast extends access to and interest in our deep dives into rules and mechanics. If you're not an AFOA member, I hope you'll consider joining us or your local football officials association in your state. If you're in the Central Texas area, email us at recruiting@afoa.ws. Visit our website at https:/www.austinfootballofficials.org/become-n-official, or call us at 512-298-2987. And I hope you'll come back and visit this podcast regularly. The clock is still ticking to kick off in 2023. Till next time, have a great week.